All right, let's begin the day. The short meditation. Imagine we have a lot to go over today. We won't spend too much time. Let's just take a few breaths together. Can be eyes open too, and melt into the space. You can use any of the tools that we've used so far, whether it's melting into the chair, feeling the gravity, feeling the body and its tingles moment to moment. So you can take in all of the space and all of everyone else here on the Zoom chat. Just sensing into the presence that we share before any stories and concepts and ideas, what we're even doing here together. There are other beings here with you. Or if you want, you can bring up your own intention for coming here today. Letting that intention or set of intentions take up all of the space in your mind. Whichever way you choose to go, you know what to do. Relax into it, share it, feel it in all of your body. Regardless of which path you've taken, occasionally just go back to the simple, nourishing breath. Go back to the entire body. Just check in how it feels like to be you right now. All of the techniques that we've learned, all of the skills that we've accumulated, what could you do for yourself right now? What's the move that would be of service? And as our last move for this drop in, and up to you if you do it eyes closed or open, whichever is simpler for you, see if you can find and inhabit your heart center. As you do it and find the resonance, specific flavor of this point, see if it can help cohere the rest of the field of your body and the entirety of awareness. It's as if before there were a few almost separate harmonies, melodies playing across the field. And as we stay in the heart, they all start playing, at least in the same rhythm. Greater symphony that exists between all those melodies comes into the forefront. We're not forcing anything, just trusting that staying at the heart naturally leads to this. There's this beautiful intensity that can happen as we're all doing this together. Just trust that staying in the heart, you have the capacity to feel it, to be with it. Now, before opening your eyes are closed and coming back. If you can stay in the heart, do the same for hearing, just by staying in the heart. Everyone else on our call today. You can feel the shared resonance. Still in your own heart point. Maybe now, as you tune into the greater field, there are a few master melodies. It's okay if you're only feeling yours. So the intention is enough. Bring the meditation to a close. About our session today, anytime you remember, feel the need to, recall that you can take a nice, nourishing breath back to the body, land in the heart. Take a moment to be of service to yourself. So we've had 15 book club sessions so far, which is incredible. And many of you have been there for all of them, almost all of them. So I want to congratulate us for the road that we've taken. We have covered a lot of territory, both intellectually and in terms of the practice, and importantly, how these correspond. It's my favorite. If you just practice based on some instruction you don't understand, it gets very stale very fast. If you only have the intellectual and don't have the practice, what's the point? It's just building more building. It's just more papancha. This threading of them together is where the real transformation lies. And so today, what we're going to do, rather than have me give a summary of this almost final chapter of part one of the book, going over everything, we have 2 or maybe 3 presentations from you. And so we're going to jump right into them. Each of them is going to be their own flavor or slice of the entire journey that we've taken together, with a particular emphasis, with a particular wisdom that the presenter has to offer. And with every person presenting, the thing that I want everyone else who's listening to do is, besides, of course, following intently, see what you can pick up from the presentation that's completely novel to you. It can either be new information that you haven't heard before, or it can be a new perspective into the existing that opens up something new for you. And I am not going to give any feedback to the presentations. I do want people to ask the presenters questions if they're willing. I know some of you are. And then at the end, we can also take another minute or two, and people who are willing, just in a sentence or two, mention the novel thing that you picked up. And so, Josh, I would love for you to go first.
So I'm excited to share with you all my summary of part one of The Heart Illuminated, putting it all together, or How to Stop Worrying and Love the Path. So just to say briefly, like I'm a huge fan of the Mind Illuminated, so that's partially framing my approach to this book so far. And just to jump right in, some motivation. So we find ourselves in this human incarnation, and there's suffering, there's dissatisfaction, there's stress. And this might come from unexamined assumptions that we have about the way things are. And we also have these beautiful drives for growth, development, connection, love, and at a certain point, we get an inkling that there might be a better way to relate to these challenges. So we engage in systematic practices to de-reify views that are rooted in ignorance, and to realize fundamental consciousness as a basis of operation. So a few methods that help us in this process are relaxing the body-mind system to shift into a mode of safety, rest, and digest that helps us integrate the mind. From there, we gather the mind using shamatha practices, and then we have the opportunity to try on and develop different views. They can be things like gratitude, especially for our coordinators, which I'll talk about in the next slide, kindness, warmth, softness, ease, among others. And then we can also bring our existing perspectives into our awareness, examine them, see if they want to transform. And so one of these views, which is helpful in the path, is how we view ourselves. And coordinators are a powerful way to do that. So a coordinator is a perspective that we have on ourself and our context, including goals and values, what's relevant to us, and how we seek to realize that goal. And we can think of them as agents or entities that can grab the steering wheel of our system. So they're shaping our perceptions, and they're shaping our sensory motor system, shaping our behaviors, physically what we do. And they do that through getting a buy-in from other coordinators and developing influence. And at least initially, these are dissociative identities. So they split themselves off from other parts of our mind and see other coordinators as separate, and they polarize with them. So we can think of them as, if they have sort of a nested hierarchy structure. So you could think of it as like the org chart of your mind, or some sort of fractal geometry. So the one of our other big leverage points is that I mentioned is checking in with our existing views. This can be low-hanging fruit as we're developing this path. And what's really cool is you can get a virtuous cycle where you start unclenching, you notice some view that you have that's constricting the mind system. You unclench that, more information can come in. We integrate that information, see a deeper principle, and simplify our processing based on that deeper principle. And that can build on itself so we can unclench even more refined or subtle view patterns. And as we engage in that process, you might notice a number of rewards or ways of viewing this development. So we get refinement of mental building blocks, like you can imagine smaller Legos or more mature adult Legos that can build more specific things and more complex configurations. We get easing of inner polarizations, so more alignment and an understanding that doesn't cast two things as opposites any longer. And we get more harmonious relationships between our coordinators. So this is overall pointing to a trend of moving from zero-sum interactions to positive-sum interactions. And one sort of meta view that's been really important to me is something that helps me not get discouraged when I feel a regression in this process of developing the basis of operation. So if we have some overall trend as we're doing this process of transforming the mind from the left-hand side, unconscious awareness, through conscious awareness, unmediated awareness, fundamental consciousness of developing higher basis of operation, where we are at any given point might be one of these bell curves. So the center of gravity is wherever we draw the center of that curve. But throughout the day, with our circadian rhythm, with our progress of insight stage, or just with life circumstances, we expect this to fluctuate up and down. And anything that we do to shift to the right could be widening the bell curve, or through insight experiences or just daily practice, move that center of gravity to the right. That's a really helpful narrative of progress that's more forgiving of momentary ups and downs that we experience. So that's what I wanted to say about my summary. I left some Easter eggs and rabbit holes of just things that I nerd out on because I couldn't resist. So I'll post the link to this in the WhatsApp and encourage you all to look if you're curious. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share, and I'm very open to questions and feedback. So
Could you, before we go to questions and comments, could you say at least one thing about one of the things you left as Easter eggs at the end?
oh yeah.
In the meantime, you're seeing the clapping hands flowing through the screen,
Yes.
the
Yes, thank
emojis.
you. I appreciate your attention. Thank you. So I want to talk about this vasocomputation thing because it's cool because it's he writes the article about a guy named Michael Edward Johnson who he writes about tanha, like and that in our the sides of all of our blood vessels, there are these smooth muscle tissue, which has a function where it can contract and cut off blood flow, which can have a huge impact on the functioning of tissues, but it can actually latch closed. So you could have parts of your body and parts of your brain that are literally the blood flow is constricted, and it could be that way for years and years. It takes no energy for it to latch once it's latched closed. So when we talk about in the heart illuminated, like getting fixed into a pattern of views, this is a clear hypothesis for how that could happen and how it could persist for so long, and how literally connecting to our circulatory system and our physical anatomical heart and pumping blood is connected to our mind system and our spiritual heart. So I was so thrilled when I found this article and heard Michael Edward Johnson talking about that. So I encourage anyone who's curious to check it out.
Now let's open the floor to any questions that you have. If you want to name one novel thing that you picked up, it sounds like Josh is also interested in feedback. So anything that comes to mind, welcome to jump in and share.
I like the the building blocks analogy, like the Lego bricks, and then the finer kind of shapes like flowers and everything. I never thought about it that way, but it's like you're kind of creating like, I guess say, mental structures that, yeah, they're more refined, more subtle.
I love the polarization analogy because it feels even more accurate than the alignment analogy, because yeah, for the parts that aren't polarized, like in the same way, there's some tension like between the magnetic fields. Well, that was super cool, and in general, just very, very cool presentation. Thank you so much.
I like the spiral and your description of that, because I just was noticing today how I've not been applying previous insights to where I am now, and kind of like, oh, because it's sort of stuck in that part of the spiral. And so I just appreciated the concision of that description.
I also like the spiral and the virtuous circuit analogy. It's resonated with me. Thank you for a very good presentation.
I really like how succinct it was. I feel that I'm the type of person who would, in this assignment, would write a book about another book. So I was like, when I listened to it, I was like, oh my God, it's actually possible to say this in like under 10 minutes. And I didn't even know that was possible. So wow, it was really helpful for me. I was like, okay, now I can even tell it to myself, the sequential order. So thank you.
I appreciated the graph of the bases progressing from one into the other in a way that helped loosen something a little more binary about those in my mind. And it is true that there's a binary jump or a qualitative jump from time to time. Then thinking about this as a continuous, like, what's it called when you have a race where one person hands the thing to the next, but having that be
Like
across
a relay race.
relay race, yeah, like across multiple dimensions and like a thickening of what the next basis of operation does for you more and more until you're ready to fully settle in it. Thinking about the image and how you describe it is like,
I really like the zero sum to plus sum, I think you said. It just like clicked things in me, maybe for some of my pieces that were like, oh, we've been doing this is what we've been doing is zero sum. So that was helpful for me. And then also the bell curve and what you said about, different, just like being at different places in that bell curve. Because in my mind, it's always like, oh, I'm back, but that bell curve makes a lot of sense. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Last chance.
I love the graphic with it was like a cool cat coordinator with the sunglasses or something. It's like I want more of that coordinator. What's the path for that? But seriously, yeah, there's a wonderful presentation, really concise and dense without feeling dense, or high information content without feeling dense.
Josh, any final words?
No, I appreciate all your kind words, and I'm sort of vibrating with joy and adrenaline. So thank you. Really felt awesome to share.
All right. Linus, are you ready to step up?
So, Jonathan, I hope you like more cats. Wait, let me try to see my notes here. Yeah, okay, great. So this is the path through my eyes with a lot of cats involved. And here we have a cat imagining a lot of different, very tasty looking pizzas, jumps at the pizzas, and well, they're not real. But let's go from pizzas to chairs and talk about concepts, because concepts I understood as a lossy compression, meaning we see a ton of chairs here, and we kind of notice what's similar. So somebody says, oh, that's a chair, and that's a chair, and maybe we learn how to spell, and then there's the text chair, and then we start to learn what a chair consists of. So like 2 to 3 salient features. Sort of we can sit on it. Maybe it has legs. It doesn't necessarily have to have something to lean against. Like we can have a stool. But the point is we learn to abstract away the particulars of any chair that we see. And then we use that concept to, oh wait, a different computer. There we go. Filter signal from noise. So when we think, for example, we have a desire to sit down maybe, so we imagine a chair. And then we have this abstract fuzzy representation of the chair, which may be described as a generative probability distribution over the features in our central space. And it's sort of like an active filter. So now we only our attention flows to the things that match that fuzzy image of the chair, and we sort of project it onto it. So we don't actually, again, we don't actually see like the concrete chair that is there, but instead sort of only the way that it fits to all the chairs we've seen before. And so maybe we don't notice a certain texture. We just care, okay, can we sit down here? In fact, we may not even notice that, because the world is made up out of concepts, but we take in much more information through our senses in our day-to-day life than we actually process. So there's, for example, these change blindness experiments in psychology, where they check how much information to how much information someone can react. Visual information, for example. There's also some interesting experiments there with meditators and how much information they can process. But generally, I understood that we only noticed the differences between what we predicted and what actually happened. So our cute little cat here predicts that there will be food in the bowl, but there's no food in the bowl. And so that's the actual thing that comes into awareness, because it's not matching what the internal model predicted. So now, like, we've gone very far away from the central information to awareness, and we only notice like a fraction of a fraction. And this leads to a bit of a problem. See if I can. Okay, so we see the world. For example, here, this beautiful garden, and we see it at different times. For example, now there's a bird, and it's probably around Christmas. And we start to merge these things together because we form expectations based on what we've already seen. And so whenever we see the garden, we think, oh, there might be like a human hand giving us food now, or maybe not. And then we start to expect that. And it's sort of tingling that part of our essential input. And this happens a lot of times. And in the end, we get this very like fuzzy image of what might happen but doesn't. And this is sort of hard to adjust to. Like, this is sort of hard to relax in because, well, oh no, this might, oh no, no, this, and we get pulled in many different directions. The more evidence we accumulate of what things mean, the harder it gets to see what's actually happening and to update our beliefs. And so this is the part where we try to talk a bit about what it means that things mean things, how models work. So this is, for the people of you that have studied something mathy or have seen Bayes' theorem before, this might look familiar. It's not exactly Bayes' theorem because we say that the belief at like time step t is sort of the belief with the evidence we have right now. But this is what like a probabilistic model might look like. We have a belief and we update it based on evidence which we gather. Now the problem is that the evidence which we gather is already changed by what we were expecting. And so we actually update our belief based on evidence which was generated using the belief we already had. And because of this, oftentimes the belief, like our updated belief, just matches what we already saw before. So this is an example from Scott Alexander, where maybe we have had a traumatic experience with a scary dog. And then every time we see this dog, which in some objective way might be perceived as friendly, again, this memory triggers of the scary dog. Maybe we don't even realize that it's like we don't actually like see the dog, the scary dog in front of us. We just notice that our heartbeat goes up and like our mouth goes dry and it's very uncomfortable and we just want to get away. And every time this gets triggered, our assumption that dogs are scary just gets more ingrained because every dog or everything that matches like this fuzzy dog concept now triggers this response. And this is what that might look like, the model rigidity, if we modeled our beliefs as these 2D like bell curves, and the how tight the curve is or how low the standard deviation is might be perceived as the model rigidity, so like how ingrained it is. And so now we have models, and there's three things that can happen. Either the perception doesn't correlate with the model, then it's filtered out, like, and we perceive things. So either the perception doesn't correlate with the model, and then it's filtered out as noise, we don't perceive it. Or the perception is correlated with the model, and it fits the model, then we also don't perceive it because there's no reason to spend like mental energy on it. And then the third case is that the perception is correlated with the model and it doesn't fit the model's prediction. So then we perceive it. But then what do we do? So we basically now need the model and the input to match in some way. And there's two ways to achieve that. One way is to squeeze the sense input in a way that fits the model. So, oh, wait, this is a dog, but the dog before was scary, and now this dog is scary too. And we squeeze it. Or we reevaluate the sense inputs that formed the model, right? Like the model is not some abstract objective thing. It consists of these saved abstracted inputs of the scary dog, for example. And so we might get stuck in a local minimum where every single reinterpretation is not like squeezing the input in there, is not as exhausting as refitting the entire model to fit all the stuff we perceived in the past. But over time, things just get tenser and tenser, and the model gets more and more confident. And so to symbolize that, I have done my best to have a little tool here. And so, for example, now we can add, and of course, this takes the assumption for some like objective way to perceive it. Maybe just think of that objective way as like the mean between all the different ways you could possibly perceive it. And so we can set an experience value and an emotional charge. And so let's set a moderate, like a pretty high emotional charge and a pretty negative experience value. And now this is our belief distribution. Now, even if we add like a pretty neutral experience, maybe we're just walking by a dog on the street with a relatively low emotional charge, notice that here, right now, the peak of this distribution is at around 1. Now we add this experience, and what happens is that we squeeze it in here. So it looks like something that the belief we already have could have generated. And now our peak goes a little bit higher. Now, if we have like a neutral experience, but maybe there's a dog barking, and so it's a bit more tense, and it goes even higher. And we are moving like the gray thing in the background is the original distribution. And this is what we believe right now, like the dotted thing here. Now we are moving a tiny bit to the right, but every time something happens, we only move the tiniest bit to the right and we squeeze it in more and more, because everything that we experience, because we've squeezed it in, is seen as more evidence for the model we already had. And so what do, right? Luckily, we have this meditation button right here. And so we can set a meditation intensity. So think of this as re-evaluating the model. I think, Josh, you did a terrific job of like explaining this in all the terms, like cultivating softness, being kind to yourself, cultivating gratitude, seeing all experiences as empty, and so on. And so what will happen is that we will sort of relax all the experiences we've had. So maybe you can think also as like a low standard deviation, so the peak being very high, as that having like a high stuck emotional charge. And so now when we meditate, we sort of release, we go back to those experiences as in maybe a good, concentrated, wholesome state, and we learn to alleviate that charge. And now we can see that like our belief distribution here expands and expands. And if we meditate to 100%, then now this is important, right? We still have the information. Like when we don't get rid of all of our beliefs. We still know, oh, like neutral things can happen and negative things can also happen. So our distribution includes all of this. It's just not as set, so it doesn't squeeze anything anymore, and we don't have to spend any energy to constantly squeeze that in. So maybe as a last thing here, I have a little Brahma Vihara cultivation slider, which should go up like when you meditate, but if it's at 100%, basically, like as soon as we have an experience, we relax around it and our model learns to include it. And so now if we have more positive experiences, our model will actually shift more to the right, and we will learn that maybe dogs aren't so bad. Okay, I think I went a bit over time, but I hope that was interesting. And yeah, if you have any questions or feedback, I would be overjoyed to hear it. Okay.
I'll start by saying I want a Dharma visualizer for any chapter of the book. This is amazing. You're blowing my mind in terms of what I realize is possible when publishing a book online. Just instead of my sketches, you could have things to play with and figure out for yourself exactly what happens throughout every stage of the path, every meditation, what it's for. It's like thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inspiring me to build this.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts, I gotta say. When I first saw the model, I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. But then as you like demonstrate it, was like, wow, it really, it's really cool. And I like that at the end, like this peak still exists. Because I think it is something it's so easy to forget. Like you still have those things with you. They're just not, yeah, they're not squeezed. So really cool.
Thank you.
I wonder if it would be possible to include like multiple coordinator interaction in the Dharma visualizer. I don't know how, but that would be like, it might be like a 2D or like 3D something. Just if you come up with an idea, that would be something like, I would find it really cool to be able to see it. Especially in the context of everything we're talking about, how to like get to consensus and what that would mean in this framework.
Yeah, so I did think about doing like, I talked about the local minimum and like the global minimum, like having to expend more energy in the moment maybe, but then overall like relaxing more, right? And so I thought about doing like a 3D landscape of that, but it's actually very computationally like intensive. Yeah, but definitely. So any inputs for this? I love to play around with it. Right?
If I think of something, I'll let you know. It's something that also just came to my mind that I was seeing these graphs. Yeah. Cool, very cool.
There's something really cool about like satisfying in my body about seeing the in high like Brahma Vihara mode, the kind of and then like it starts to match. It just like settles something in. And then like all the cat imagery is still floating through my brain. They stick very well. I was like, these are amazing. And I keep thinking like, oh my God, there's pizzas everywhere that aren't real. Oh, it's a pizza. It's not real.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that GIF. Really fun.
Yeah, thank you, Linus. I'm have needs met for the cuteness and the technical precision of your presentation, and I'm especially enjoyed kind of felt seen with like the mixing of the priors, and the cat sees all these weird shady things out the window and how confusing that can be. And I think it's even coming through in the demo right now. It's like, wait, which curve was which experience, and I'm not sure. And yeah, that really resonates for me. So thank you.
What was this interesting for me was the understanding that the stress is caused by the uncertainty of the model of the world. So I think it's a very deep understanding. Thank you. It also was very impressive with the visualizer and the cats, but for me, this idea was very impressive.
Yeah, I really liked the way just now, Josh, you drew the connection between the blended cat pictures and the blended curves, because I feel like so often it's like, oh, there are points in our past or like discontinuities or traumatic experiences or things, but what we are, of course, is the blending of all of that, like right in this moment. And that's a really, really great Linus, like a really great way of illustrating that. And it's pretty remarkable that given that we're all just like these cats with all like these weird blended misperceptions of reality, somehow like we're able to get along and communicate and coordinate on larger scales. That's kind of crazy that we're able to do that at all.
Yeah. And I wanted to say I felt that so hard when Sophie, you said, "Oh, if I were to do this, I would write a book on a book," because that's exactly how I felt when I tried to prepare this. And I like at first I wanted to start with the section about, oh, language is also like this very relative fuzzy concept, and when you use it, it changes. And so I think it was really great, Dor, how you started this meeting of the book club, because there's so much information also in just being tuned in to the others that makes it easier to bridge that gap that language like naturally has. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Any last comments or questions? I'll also say I was so happy with the way that you presented the matrix chair, right? Like the average of all of them. That's another one that I guess after the call I tried to convince you to let me use in the book. It's so beautifully presented. Is this yours? Did you make it?
I generated it with Nano Banana.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow. Feel like a proud Dharma Papa. Okay, does anyone else want to jump in? Even if you have 2 lines of a summary or a poem or a body wriggle, an interpretive dance of what it's like to unsqueeze from the model. Anything else? Any act, any creative act that you feel like jumping in with? Now is the time.
Okay, I'm gonna give that a go. Okay, it's gonna be improvised body interpretation of everything that I've learned. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Any questions or comments? No, just kidding. Any, anyone else?
Well, the light streaming behind you as you're sharing that really just like not even metaphorical, the light of consciousness streaming streaming out, just right there on the screen.
One last chance before we move on.
Oh, I really felt at one moment that it had this beautiful. A few meetings ago, we talked about like childlike innocence, of all the coordinators, and it really felt like I could really feel the expression of that, and sort of playing peekaboo with the world. Yeah, thank you. That was very beautiful.
All right. So unless anyone else has any contribution, what I want to do next is share my screen, go over the visuals of the chapter, which are a lot less impressive than the ones that you made, showing the progression of the entire practice path. We'll just briefly delay on each of them. See that we get the main essence of the message that I try to bake into them, and have a little discussion, ask any questions. So let me share. So we begin with a bunch of beeps and boops. I think that's clear to us, which we then start pattern matching and creating these abstracted, averaged notions we call symbols. These collections of various sensory modalities into an object. Stop me at any point if you have any question. Now, with this, what I tried to show was that through the collection of symbols and possible actions and changes to our perception and attempts to answer needs, we start getting those entities, subminds, coordinators, who not only have some agency over the system in terms of their capacity to reorient to information streams, but can also start shaping the reality themselves. This is very much in line with the presentations we just saw. They warp perception to fit their existing ideas, to fit their existing agendas. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, a quick question about the term symbol. So when
Yeah.
you say symbol, do you mean sort of like in my mind, conceptually, I feel like symbol is separate from something that which it stands for. How do you yourself, what do you mean when you say that word?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. We take a lot of information and then we reduce it to the essentials. In the suffering chapter, I talk about principal component analysis. And it's like what Linus was showing earlier. This like the fundamental pattern of chair, the very abstract one, that's sort of the average, but not just the average, the minimum viable dimensions and their ranges. Like, is it brown? How brown it is from 0 to 10? How rigid or how wood-like is it from 0 to 10? And then we have that as a symbol, and what we describe as prediction error can be as a more inclusive category be mentioned not as an error so much as every time we see something in the world, we have perception, we have new sensations coming in. We don't so much represent those sensations. We have the symbol, right? The abstract chair, and then how distant is the brownness from the average? How distant is the woodness from the average? Right? So we save a lot of energy instead of every time constructing a whole new chair, a whole new world from scratch. We have the average. It's very energy efficient. And then we just like, oh, +2 for this, -2 for that. And we have the chair that's in front of us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around this way of thinking about it, but what about like linguistic symbols? Are they distinct from what you're talking about?
No, they're exactly the same. It's just that linguistic symbols are very high up the abstraction. Imagine that a single word spoken to you can evoke your entire field of experience. They can resonate throughout your whole body. They can just like ring the bell of so many other different symbols and evoke an experience and emotions and a changes in your body, in your hormonal system, in how activated you are. Right? A single word can just like a
Yeah,
stone thrown into a still lake, just like.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But then is symbol distinct from like when there is the reference of the symbol, what is the reference in that case in your like in the way that you just explained it?
What is the reference for a
The
symbol?
referent, like what the symbol refers to, its referent.
Yeah. So we're starting with meaningless, let's say, or as yet to be interpreted streams of sensations through all of the sensory modalities that we have, vision and tactile, all and all the rest, all coming together, right? And this, of course, is designed as a sphere just for continuation with the rest of the presentation, but each of them also have slightly different characteristics, even though ultimately they're all different types of frequencies, right? Different types of vibrations, I should say, not frequencies. And then we start bunching those frequencies together into a symbol. And the symbol is sort of the pattern of that frequency. It's like if you have a song and you plot the frequency graph, you know that area of the song is the part where the lady sings. And then you take just the contour of that and we call it singing. Does
So
that make
that's the
sense?
symbol. So
Yes.
what you said about singing is singing the symbol then.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
every time we hear that clip again, we're like, oh, singing. And then every time something, even if it doesn't have the exact same vibration, it sort of has that pattern. We're like, oh, singing. And if it
Yeah.
matches even more closely, it's woman singing.
So is that in this case, it's synonymous with concept, it seems.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Now, worth saying that the symbol or concept are themselves also vibrational patterns. And I hope we have time to get to this later. I want to just plant the seed of the more abstract we go, or the more we spin into samsara, the more we papancha, when we construct deeper and deeper into some map, the coarser the vibration is going to be. It will be slower and denser, you could say, where these are generally finer, quick. As we go through construction, become slow and dense. Now, another thing I wanted to show with the eye here, note that as it comes in, it also warps the underlying symbols and underlying sensations. Meaning, because we have those concepts, because we have those averages, and they inform perception or they filter perception, there's a continuous warping. This is the same squeezed model that Linus was showing us. So they each have their model, this model of existence. And now we see that one of the coordinators is particularly interested in the symbol. This can be a human, or you can talk about this as a representation of the self, what we think we are. And because the submind itself is an average of an average of an average, or a concept over a concept of a concept, even though that concept also has agency, it also has capacity to change behavior. Any time that it looks or directs attention, it naturally also warps the thing that it's looking at, whether it's part of it or not. So seeing something, paying attention to something, the result depends on where we come from. So it's what is it that's seeing, and what's the intention that's baked into the beam of attention being directed at sensory perception or at any symbol. And not only does it warp the symbol, but there's a way that the warpiness also affects the entire space. And I'm saying this now just to have start to bake this intuition. We won't go into it too deeply. Later on, I plan to write a section called Consciousness as Attention Structure. Also very much corresponding, Josh, to what you mentioned as vasocomputation. The way that essentially any tissue, but in vasocomputation, the smooth muscles governing blood vessels essentially participate in computation, almost like transistors or logic gates. Just, am I squeezed this much or this much or this much? Almost like an analog bit that determines how much information, or even just physiologically, what is happening in the system based on the blood flow, based on any physiology that can contract, that can change its state. So in this one, what I want to show is once this guy looks at the self and warps it, the other guys are like, hey, what's going on? Something's being warped, and it's warped in a way that I don't like. So now I will try to look at the thing that's warping, even if I have no agenda first to change it, to do something about it. Again, just the looking is causing another warping. So now we see both of them together. This is now creating a bit of a divot here as well, just through the act of these guys looking to see, hey, what's warped? And if we do this enough, if you look enough, that starts becoming etched in the system. It's not infinitely plastic. The more we do it, the more our consciousness, the more the models of mind start being contracted or squeezed in this habitual way. This is partly what we call karma. In this one, what I'm trying to show is that even those high-level parts or sub-minds, sub-identities, can create a conglomerate, can create their own island, world island. And you can see the contour here, inside of which, because these are now in control and perceiving, information comes in, they're in control, perception of behavior. And these two are a little grayed out. They're not receiving information. They're certainly not in control. They might be pressing from the basement of the mind, from the subconsciousness. In a sense, they're in the shadow. And the simple definition of shadow is just anything that's not in conscious awareness. Anything that has a hard time getting into conscious awareness. And that's naturally what happens anytime we have a conglomerate like this that's continuously in control. Because imagine a situation like what we showed here, where I, a part, or my identity, want to look or do something a certain way, and just the activity of the other coordinators is enough to warp how I am warping the world. So, of course, the natural solution is to organize with other coordinators who are sort of warping the same way and shut everything else out. And so these types of behaviors are what we then, I think I have this here, talk about when we speak about the hindrances or the taints or the less developed strategies. What I mean by that is rather than aligning together on how to warp, which of course ultimately leads to how to non-warp while still moving in the world, we use aggressive strategies to push other coordinators out, to warp their information streams, to distract the entire perceptory apparatus from anything that might allow them to come into control. This is a representation of what happens at max tension. So even the conglomerate sort of breaks down, and every time one of these takes control, we completely disappear into unconscious awareness. There's just one part that perceives, and everything else is shut down. We lose ourselves. And I suppose here's my short interpretation of the entire path. We collect the mind, we install skillful views, which essentially just means allow the coordinators or let's say prod the coordinators and catalyze the process of them agreeing on more developed principles of collaboration. And then from every level of new collaboration, which results in a baseline being of higher frequency, because we need to construct less, because we need to tense away from each other less. And so we don't go deeply into different world islands with their own language, but each using fewer of the resources of the system to a place of greater harmony, of greater coherence, or because this greater communication is allowed, because we have more resources, we don't have to construct away. We don't have to interpret the world in a way that continuously iterates on and reifies our own separate construction and understanding and narrative and identity. And then at the bottom of this, what we call fundamental consciousness, as we learn to recognize it and then just be it, every pre-existing coordinator, all the karma that exists in the system can start transmuting towards those assumptions. And of course, this happens at every stage, as I mentioned, every base of operation, we have this upgrade in terms of the collaborative qualities or agreements of the system, resulting in a general higher frequency of your being that everything transmutes to, until ultimately we based in fundamental consciousness, a place from which there's no longer unconscious warping. In some sense, you could say there's no warping at all. We become one with the universe, or an extension of Mahamudra, or a co-creator, and one that's in resonance with the entirety of things versus spinning inside our own internal virtual worlds. And we achieve that by starting to meditate. And this meditation, bringing together as many of the participants of mind who are willing to play a part, creates a new shared and collaborative space between them. Represented here in the sphere that crosses the borders, and the I that's created inside, made of every part of these other coordinators that's willing to try and play a more developed game. Reminding you again to stop me for any questions if you have them. Yes.
So like the big I, does it represent metacognitive awareness?
So here in this image, it's representing conscious awareness. There's enough willingness for the participants to share the information coming in versus just interpreting them in their own terms and preventing any other coordinator in the system to do something relevant to their own world island, to their own agendas, to their own conceptual understanding and map of the world. And metacognitive awareness is a skill that's generated once you have that capacity. Once you have conscious awareness, you can then start having awareness of awareness or metacognitive awareness, and you can start reasoning about what's coming into awareness and to awareness itself and about awareness itself.
Yeah, does that also correspond to the witness state? I never fully understood the witness state. Maybe you could just comment briefly.
Yeah. So people call the witness state, or they point to, I think, multiple things, but what the essence of it is essentially when you move your identity from the symbol of the self, of the meat bag, of the meditator, into awareness. And you become the witness. You're no longer the person to whom things happen. Now you are the entirety of awareness where the person and all this other stuff happens.
Is it the same as like I am that?
It's closer to that, but it's
Mhm.
not that, because the witness or this still has a perspective represented
Yeah.
by the I that's continuously overlaid on top of perception. I am that is more at the end, spoilers. So now I'm arising as this network. Now I'm arising as this symbol. Now I'm just, right? I'm just this thing that I'm seeing, this thing that I'm doing. There's no longer something that continuously reifies itself into pretending it's a separate entity. And of course, more than pretending, it really is moving in polarization or against the greater system that we're embedded in and that we ultimately merge in and with the frequency of when we stop karmically, obsessively papanchaing denser frequencies away from it in a way that misses the fundamental consciousness.
Yeah, this makes sense. So the witness state is essentially identity with consciousness or awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, at this, it doesn't necessarily happen. Right now, we can still be a meditator that has conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Later on, we have an awareness, or we are an awareness in which a meditator arises, or even other beings arise. And that's also where non-separation or non-duality starts coming into play. It's not so much I am aware of you, but there's an awareness in which things arise. This is what we were speaking about in the last session. In the sketch with the person who's sort of stuck inside their world of symbols. Then he changes, and there's still a witnessing, there's still an awareness, but both him and his friend arise, and then all these relevant symbols. Boys?
Question about the use of frequency. High and low frequency, is it like the smaller and larger Lego bricks, or is
Yes.
it something? Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Very much so. You can make a slower frequency with a faster frequency, but not the other way around. And as we go through this process, just having a view of the entire system, or more and more of the system, naturally, it starts cohering, starts organizing. This is some of what we did today at the end of the meditation, being at the heart point. It's just a natural nexus for all of the different parts, for the entire space of awareness to start coming into resonance, to start coming into a mutual seeing. And naturally, and that this is what the mind does, it organizes things in a beautiful and graceful way. It just needs the right perspective. And of course, all meditation is progressive, more refined perspective taking. The transition here, marked by this being a little more black, here becoming more transparent, is what I was trying to point to in terms of unmediated awareness. And so in the context of each of those guys, subminds, warping the space, right, just through the mere act of their existence, and then warping it more with attention, it's an act of mediating sensory perception into their particular map of reality. And every more progressive view that we take, every progressive view of emptiness that we learn how to agree on, is essentially an agreement to mediate perception less. And it's like what Linus was pointing to. It's not that we just eradicate our models. We just make them less loose and less reactive, where the reactivity, what we call tanha, craving, grasping, is the model trying to squeeze itself versus allow new information through, even if it doesn't correspond with the model, in a way that, of course, then naturally allows the model or models downstream to update. So this becomes less mediated, and we continue going beyond assumptions that we thought were a fundamental property of reality, but that we discover was just a continuous unconscious construction of mind. Unconscious in the sense we were not aware that we were doing it. We were not aware that we were projecting our map of the world onto existence, and filtering, mediating perception through it. And then we get to the point where we don't have to even make an effort to stay in the type of unmediated awareness that is in contact with fundamental consciousness. Sometimes this is what would be called self-arising, self-sustaining awake awareness or mediated awareness. Awareness that's now not just spinning inside of itself, but is at least aware of fundamental consciousness, of those frequencies, even if it doesn't, even if it has not fully yet aligned to it, and even if there is still some karma that continuously lead to this type of warping of the space. What happens here at this point, where we can even just take it off of the cushion, or I would say every one of those progressive views we could take off of the cushion, but at this point there's no real point at spending time in formal meditation anyway. And so we just go about our lives, and there's this continuous agreement for each of the perspectives to come to offer its particular flavor of warping, relax completely, and allow the space to be taken by someone else. Just a beautiful, loving collaboration. I allow you the space and even support your expression. And I trust that when you're done, when you have concluded your service, you're going to spin down and relax by yourself. Which after a while, because I'll say more about this, every time, this is very important for the path. In some sense, this is the final view one takes. Every time perception, or let's say karma, is allowed to express as perception or behavior in a way where it's not warped by another coordinator, right? It doesn't cause another eye to look in a warped way towards the other eye. Every time it happens and can just express and go back to rest, it also exhausts some of the karma. In this sense, it's like we're based in fundamental consciousness, and it is moving us. And every time it moves us and there's no interruption, it's like a river that flows through the gunk of karma that existed before. Or the perception moves through the existing model, and because the model is not fighting so hard to keep it together, it smooths it and allows it to remodel in a way that's aligned to fundamental consciousness. And then ultimately we get to a point where there's no part of the system that's continually spinning in the background. There's no more attachment. There's no more karma. No more action that's waiting in the system for the opportunity to be expressed. We've cleaned the slate. We've paid down all of the karmic debt. And now we are moved by the greater system of this universe, of the Mahamudra, the grand gesture, the logos, the logic of existence. And we still have our subjective experience, but that subjective experience does not occur to a subject. So there's a way that even talking about subjective experience is a little funky here, but there is still this continuously arising coordinated network of perception and action. There are still symbols. There's still movement in the world. There's still even desire, of course, because we are still a biological entity. We have needs that are expressed. We have plans. We have values. These don't go away. It's just that we stop being obsessively, refinedly spinning them into place and then perceiving the rest of reality from them. Or at least if we do that, it's by choice. There's no reason why a bodhisattva won't go around with a plan for hours or days or weeks or months with a full knowledge that they're doing this, even if it's a little tense, out of service to all beings. And when the time comes, it could just dissolve again into the meaningless leaps and loops of fundamental consciousness. Background agitation finally dies down. Yes, Tyler.
So in this, my kind of interpretation, I guess, of all of this is like in sitting in, I guess, emptiness, maybe non-dual awareness, like just through this practice, you kind of arrive here eventually. But where do those like fundamental insights, like 3 characteristics, fit in this path?
So each of those characteristics, great question. Each of those characteristics, when you apply as practice, it's sort of like one of these perspectives coming into the foreground and then interpreting everything in its terms. And so if you're looking for anatta, for no self, you bring up this perspective, and the more refined your basis of operation, the higher it is, the less it's going to look like this, like you're looking for the self, but in the process of looking for the self, you're also creating it a little bit. Because when you have the view of no self, or you're trying to see that there is no self, or even if you're trying to see the more refined understanding of this, which is anything that we identify with as a self leads to suffering, there's already a pre-assumption of somewhere in the system there is a self, or there is an identification with the self. And that itself is a perspective and something that can be a self. So I want to be clear, it's still a tool. It's what we can call a liberating view, because it does allow, when we see, essentially we would see that this activity is happening. There's something that's looking at an object and making it about itself and warping it like it wants to. And then when we see it, sometimes we can relax a little bit. You see the tension that it causes. But the fuller exhaustion of karma and liberation can only come when we let go of all views. And in this context, I would say similarly with the mark of suffering, it's just this understanding everything that I grab or all conditioned phenomena, and condition here is mediated through an existing act of perception that we are obsessively iterating on samsarically, right? Conditioned by this process is suffering. So we can see that, but just trying to see it this way is creating more of the thing. And anicca, right, like impermanence or the changiness of all things, it is a beautiful view. It does let you see that nothing holds, like in a more like conceptual sense. You learn that your models and even yourself, which is this culmination of all of the integration of models, fundamentally cannot be stable, fundamentally cannot be set. And as you go deeper and deeper with this view, it starts opening you up to this way that every frequency is composed of faster frequencies. And when you see the faster frequency, there's a way that the coarser model cannot hold. It's continuously bombarded by the prediction errors coming from the higher frequency, showing it exactly where the slower model does not fully take on the underlying reality. So it's also a way to break down assumptions and go deeper and deeper into the more fundamental reality. But if you do that as this is what I need to do in meditation, we're stuck in the same place. There's a meditator and it's contracting the space. It's a conditioned activity. It's looking for something specific. And if it's looking for something specific, it will never see the whole thing. It will never allow the full flow of the universe in every moment to arise as it would most naturally.
Cool. Thanks.
So we're a bit over time. Happy to stay here with you and keep answering questions and musing, but also want to respect that if anyone wants to jump off, that would be a good time. We've gone through really comprehensive view of the whole path. I'm very, very happy and satisfied with what we've done here today. Thank you all for coming and for your questions and for the beautiful presentations and for the really beautiful intentions and come from. I see you all stepping into our collective field with. Really want to celebrate us all for going on this journey together. Feel moved by our sincerity, our collective willingness, determination to go on this path together. You all. Jonathan, very happy to continue going. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So one bit of confusion I have with this model is that starting at the beginning, how the description that it saves energy to compress the beeps and boops of the sensory inputs into symbols and concepts, and then these constructions. Doesn't that imply that this path should, because it saves energy, that our minds were constructed the way that they initially are, shouldn't it take more energy to deconstruct it in this way?
You're asking if it takes more energy to deconstruct. No, I'm not following. A different way.
So going back or up to the very first graphic, how we begin with just like the
Yeah.
little beeps and boops of sense inputs, and then you described how it compressing those into symbols and concepts is a way to save energy.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that imply that then to go from that compressed state to an uncompressed state should take more energy?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's not that we're going into a completely uncompressed state, right? Because every time we're active, we're still compressing. It's just as because we have the entire resources of the system to figure out what are the correct dimensions to, or not correct, but let's say most efficient dimensions to compress into. And we have the entire capacity of the system to unfurl the problem in terms of measuring the distance from the model, and use all of the processing power in the moment to evoke the exact right type of compression. We're still compressing, but much more efficiently so. Not only in terms of not continuously obsessively compressing, but also in terms of all of the wisdom is available for just the right compression for the moment.
So it's like an optimization strategy that still saves energy, but in a much more efficient way.
Yep. All perception, I would say all intelligence is compression. And so there's a way that this entire path is about refining intelligence. It's the sort of thing that Buddhists don't really like to talk about. But yeah, we have a more efficient mind. It's not necessary that we then go, build a company or change the world in some way, even though a bodhisattva, especially in the modern world, would often be inclined to do so. But it is very relevant to understand that this is what happens. If the mind rests, it has more energy and capacity to compress just right. It's more capacity to be intelligent with much less energy.
Oh, thank you.
Alex?
I have a question about, so just to give it some context, not so long ago, I had a psychedelic experience where I could see the construction of the world very clearly. And but then in my daily life, I often have situations where I have to kind of squeeze and compress my perception for various reasons. And then I end up in a state where it's like either I keep going, because if I stop, then I'll have to then I'll lose my momentum. And so I kind of have to keep compressing, but at the same time, I'm recognizing that I'm getting more and more obsessive as I do that.
Yep.
And like kind of what I'm trying to understand, and I don't know if it's even a valid question to ask, but the question that I want to ask is what makes it so that when you are in this obsessed, compressed state where you just cannot snap out of it, why is it that sometimes you can see that arising, but like when you're in it, you can't? Like what makes the switch? Because I'm totally aware that this is just a construct because I have prior experiences that intellectually inform my perception of the world, even perception of this papancha. But then what makes papancha that just kind of that pops out of fundamental consciousness and I can just see, oh, that's just like a useful view. So what makes it loose, not tense, when you cannot snap out of it?
So in the Dharma visualizer, we had the emotional charge slider. So imagine you constantly have that slider, even a few more sliders that are tied to the fundamental assumptions of the system, such that when you have an experience that you're contracted into versus one where you can jump out and play with emptiness, let's say, take a view of emptiness. This one has more charge. It feels more like a survival threat. And we have a sense, because of all of the narrative of our lives, that there's really something at stake here. I cannot let this go. I have to get the job. I have to get the girl. I have to get the whatever. I have to be seen in this way. The situation has to be exactly as, and even if you have another part, it's like hey guys, it's all emptiness. Hey guys, let's be free. That's so much momentum, as you were saying. Like, no, we gotta get the girl, gotta get the job, gotta get the cookie.
Yeah, so it's the emotional charge essentially. What I notice is that if I kind of just decide, like make a resolve that like now I'm gonna let go, I'm gonna just lie in bed and meditate, and then it does wind down. But I'm kind of wondering what to do to just still stay productive, not have to retreat,
Yeah.
but be more relaxed. Do you have any advice on that?
So, that's the challenge, right? Because we don't have, or most of us don't have the luxury of just disappearing from the world and meditating forever. And even if we did, a lot of the change that happens is only in the friction with reality in the moment. It's the only
Yeah.
chance for many of those models to really arise and refine. And I also want to point you to, I think it was like 3 sessions ago, we were speaking about not just waking up, which culminates in karmic release and then not having anything obsessively spin in the background, but also growing up, where we learn how to, and this is again a path of greater efficiency, create compressions in the world, including those of perception and of action. And even if we do just the growing up without the waking up, that type of greater efficiency does help us be, let's say, more relaxed, or it gives us an easier time maintaining a meditative state or higher view in the world because of the efficiency, because there's less tension, because there's less stuff that has to be exactly this way, and our strategies are still very old. It's just for an intuition pump. Something is that's contracted this way, even if it's something that a 30-year-old would do, right? I'm going to have a chat with my boss about a pay raise. It's still rooted in its fundamental models in a perception of time of a 2-year-old, which you've never upgraded. And it's very tense and it's very naive. And as we do this upgrading work, just having more adult, more developed relationship with time, and of course with self and space and other beings and our internal parts and so on, the exact same activity is much as it's still a little, oh, something at stake here, I gotta get the pay raise. But because the foundations are more refined, it's a little more chill.
So growing up is about changing those foundational assumptions so that they're not based so much in your childhood views,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You still get the warping, but the warping is much more fine. It takes less energy,
Yeah.
greater capacities. We can generally achieve more with less.
And what if like you don't have a clue how to like maybe you're just like so tense that you can't come up with a more mindful or skillful strategy?
Yeah, that's what we
And
call
you,
hell.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's difficult because that means that you have to wind down because your perception is just so contorted that you can't see
yeah.
clearly. And that
Good,
is
good.
also in a sense is like a step back, even though to meditators might not sound like that, but it is like from the point of view of living in the world, um, because it means that you will have lose that momentum of what you were doing, even though you were doing it from a place that's not too efficient. But yeah,
Consider that hell is a place where you don't even know you can relax.
where you don't even know you can relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's sort of like be be mindful of that. It's pretty uncomfortable. Yeah.
And as we consider a realm like this of a hill, someone stuck in such deep papancha, such deep suffering in samsara, they don't even know about the dharma. They don't know they can let go. They don't know they can stop. Notice what it evokes in you.
Yeah, that's just like terrible existence. And I want to help that person, but most of the time I can't because they won't know what I'm talking about. um, and yeah, it's hard.
And you know what you're saying is exactly what happened to Gautama Buddha in the suttas upon his awakening. He was like, I've discovered something amazing. And it's just there's no way that I can tell this to anyone. How do we even begin to explain that this is possible? And then, if I remember correctly, like a spirit or a deva comes in and tells him, you know, some of them only have little dust in their eyes. Some of it are ready to hear the message. And
Yeah, that's true.
bodhisattvas, as people taking on this commitment to awaken for the service, to be of service to all beings. That's what we need to know. We are looking for the people who seem ready, who are inspired even just by the way you show up, and maybe ask a question. We are ready to hear that there's another way.
Yeah, thanks, Dor.
Any other question or comment before we close for today? Covered a lot. I want to make sure we have space for everything to come together. And sorry, Alex, this is for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll take a look at the text again. Thanks.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. It's a really beautiful ride.
Thank you very much.
See you all next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.